Welcome, everyone. My name is Julianne Cost. I'm the digital imaging evangelist at Adobe. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about compositing in Photoshop. So I'm going to be walking through one of my recent composites in order to explore the tools in Photoshop that enable me to quickly select subjects, scale and resize them non-destructively, as well as then unify them through color and tone and texture. So one thing you might notice, my composites are really relatively quite simple. I often think that more is less and less is more. So the majority of my composites contain a primary subject, a secondary subject, and it's set in an environment or a landscape that I create. So everything in my composites is there for a reason, to tell a single story. I don't want to include anything that's extraneous that could be distracting. So in this image, primary subject is the tree with the bulbs on it. Secondary subject are the little orange bulbs that form the path in the environment. In this image right here, we have the front pod as the primary subject with the pod that looks like a bird. And then we have the secondary subject as the pods in the background set in this environment that has the water and the stepping stones between the two pods. And here it's even simpler, right? I just have one primary subject set in an environment. Now, this might not be exactly your style, but I'm just telling you what works for me. And if you're new to compositing, maybe this way of thinking can help you. Thinking that your canvas in Photoshop is like your stage, and that's the environment, and you're then going to add your primary and secondary subjects to it. So this is the image that we're going to be walking through today. I get a lot of my inspiration through books, things that I read, as well as dreams that I have. So this image is called Exhale. And we can see here that here are the 8 primary images that make up this composite. So we're going to start by setting the stage with this iceberg. Then we're going to go ahead and add the clouds to it. And then we're going to add a bottle. That would be the primary subject. And we're going to fill that with some breakers as well as some atmosphere. And then we'll go ahead and add our secondary object and then our secondary subject. And then we're going to need to unify these using color and tone. And then as a last step, we'll also add a texture layer to also make it look a little bit more believable. Well, I don't know if believable is the right word, because I do make this surreal composites. So I just need it to look realistic enough so that the viewer can temporarily suspend their disbelief and enter into the image. And just a thought about this one. If you have something that is beautiful yet sad, then you can create a conflict, and that also makes an image more interesting. It also asks the viewer to ask some questions. So, all right, let's go ahead and escape out of here. We're going to scoot over to Photoshop. And because we don't have much time today, I've already taken the liberty to create a new blank canvas, and then I placed all of these multiple layers as smart objects. And the reason that I'm using smart objects is because they are the actual raw file. So if I start with raw files in Lightroom Classic, or maybe the Bridge to Camera Raw workflow, and I open them in Photoshop as smart objects, that tells those programs to hand off a copy of that raw file into Photoshop. So that means if I need to make changes, like say I change a blend mode or something, and I need to lighten or darken it, I'm actually going to be working and editing the contents of the smart object, which will give me the best quality. And if I need to transform them, make them larger or smaller, I can do as many transformations as I want to the same layer, because all the information is actually held under the hood by Photoshop. Okay, so let's just turn off some of the visibility of some of these layers, like the bottle and those 2 clouds. So we're going to start with the iceberg. I've got my move tool selected, so I'll just reposition that down to the bottom of the canvas area there, and I want it to slowly fade. So if you're new to compositing, I'm going to click on the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers panel. That adds a white mask, and masking is always the same in Photoshop. Where the mask is white, you can see the contents of the layer. Where the mask is black, it's going to hide the contents. Doesn't matter if you've got a type layer, a smart object, a pixel-based layer, a shape layer, always works the same. So I'm going to tap the G key to get the gradient, and I'm just going to right click and reset that tool. It's going from black to white, so black will hide, white will show. So I'll start at the top here and then just slowly drag down into the image, and I get this nice gradient in the mask, which will slowly translate into showing and hiding the contents of that layer. All right, so let's go ahead and make the next layer visible. These are the lower clouds. I'm just going to move them up a little bit and do the same thing. I'll add a mask. The mask is going to be white. Tap G for the gradient tool. And I'm going from black to white. I want to hide this little island in the foreground. So I'll click maybe at the base of the clouds and then start dragging up. And of course, the shorter the gradient you drag, the more abrupt the transition will be. The longer the gradient, the nice and subtle the transition will be. All right, we'll do the same thing for the upper clouds. I'll just make it visible, and then using the mask icon, I'll add a layer mask, tap my gradient tool. Again, now we're going from black to white, and I want to hide this area here. But let's say, for example, that maybe I draw it in the wrong direction. You can always redraw your gradient, or you can just use the properties panel and scroll down, and there's a little invert button, or you can use Command I on Mac or Control I on Windows in order to invert the mask. Now, the mask and the layer are going to move and transform together because they're linked. So if I select the move tool and just reposition this up a little bit further in the image area, then those will move together. Okay, so I like that, except the lower clouds have a little bit too much blue in them. So like I mentioned, these are smart objects. So if I double click on the thumbnail for the smart object in the layers panel, that's going to bring up the contents of that smart object in Camera Raw because it's a raw file. So I'm going to just decrease some of that saturation, get that out of the clouds and click OK. And Photoshop will re-render it from that raw information. So I've lost no quality whatsoever. But if I double click on this upper clouds, doesn't open up in Camera Raw because this original was a JPEG. So I'll go ahead and just close that, but I do want to make it lighter. So in order to lighten it, I could add a curves adjustment layer from the bottom of the layers panel. But when we make an adjustment with that curve, it's going to darken or lighten all of the layers underneath it, unless I create what's called a clipping mask. So with the curve layer selected, I'll choose layer and then create clipping mask. Or I could just click on the clipping mask icon in the curves panel or in the properties panel. And now I can go ahead and make my adjustment. Of course, this is non-destructive. I can come back and adjust this at any time. All right, so my stage is set. It's time to add my first primary element, which is going to be the bottle. So I'll be sure that I target that layer in the layers panel. There's a lot of ways to select things in Photoshop. In the past, I probably would have used the pen tool and made a nice vector path around here. But today, I'm just going to go to the select menu and I'm going to say select subject, and it's just going to select it just beautifully for me. Now, selecting glass is actually hard, especially when you shoot it against white, because there's the specular highlight around the rim. So I am going to zoom into 100% and just double check it. And sure enough, there's a little bit of an issue here. So I'm going to hold down my shift key, right? So I switched to the lasso tool by tapping the L key, and I'm just going to add this area right here. And then it actually didn't include this area over here, which I like. So, well, I like that it didn't include it. So I'm actually going to subtract this as well. So I'm just holding down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on Windows to get rid of that. Now, there's another little area right here that I do want to select. So I will hold down the Shift key. Great. I think we've got all of that. And then right down here at the bottom, this is actually quite a straight line, and I don't want to have to draw that. So I'm going to start down here with the Shift key. And because this is already selected, all I need to do is draw a loose line till I'm right about here. And then when I release the cursor, Photoshop will automatically close that selection and draw the straight line for me. Excellent. So let's zoom out. And on the layers panel, I'm going to click to add a layer mask. Photoshop is smart enough to know, hey, you had a selection made. Go ahead and create the mask from that selection. Then I'll use the move tool and just reposition this down. But I need to kind of make it look like it's sitting on that iceberg. And there's actually a shadow in the original image. So with that mask still targeted, I'm going to switch to the paintbrush, just get a little bit smaller of a brush and tap the 5 key to set it to maybe 50, you know what, maybe 3 for 30%. And I'm going to want to paint with let's look at the mask right here, Option, click on it. I want to show more of it, so I'm going to paint with white, right? So I'm just going to paint right over, well, I've got black as my foreground color, so I better exchange them. A little smaller brush. And now I'm just going to paint with black. I'm going to paint with white right here. And it's going to slowly, sorry, I should probably have done it with 50%, but see how it's slowly showing that shadow that's in the original image. All right, and that's what I wanted, so that it looks like it's sitting more on the iceberg and it's creating or casting a shadow. All right, so Command 0 to zoom out. We need to start filling this, but I also want to see through the bottle, right? Because it's glass. So let's change the blend mode. So in the layers panel, I'm going to change the blend mode to multiply. So now I can see through it. And now we'll add these breakers. So I'm going to target the layer as well as make it visible. And we'll zoom in just a little bit here. And I'm going to switch. I'm not going to use select subject. I'm going to come over and use the object selection tool. And I'll change the mode just to rectangle. And I'll just click and drag over all of those breakers. And Photoshop's going to kind of shrink wrap it down to select them. And the breakers that I'm interested in are kind of these two breakers and these over here. And if we zoom in to 100%, we can see it didn't quite get the selection correct there. So again, I'll switch to the lasso tool. And then I'm just going to hold down the Option key because I want to delete that area, that extra area there. So Option key on Mac, that would be the Alt key on Windows. And I like the selection there. That's good, good, good. All right, I don't really care about that area over there. So let's go ahead and just add our mask by clicking on the mask icon at the bottom of the layers panel. Use the Move tool, reposition that, and line that up at the bottom, right about there. Okay, so do you see that little edge there? I don't really want that. So what I need to do is I need to choke the mask. I need to bring the mask in. So with the mask targeted on the layers panel, I can go to the select menu and choose select and mask. And we're going to concentrate on these global refinements here. So right now I have a hard edge mask, right? There aren't a lot of various levels of gray in there. It's pretty much just black and white. So this means when I shift the edge to choke the mask, if I move it to the left, or spread the mask if I move it to the right, it can't move very much. But if I increase the feather amount, now I can move this more widely. So let's go back to the view on layers, right? And I'll add a little bit more of a feather. And now we can see that I can shift that edge more, but it gets soft, right? So then you can use the contrast slider to build up the contrast along that edge that you've just created, and that is much better. All right, so I'm going to click OK there in order to apply that, but I need to get rid of it outside of the bottle. So let's Command click on the bottle layer, and what that's going to do is it's going to load it up as a selection, but I actually need to select the inverse. So Command Shift I will select your inverse. So now everything outside of the bottle is selected, and black is my background color. So I'll use the shortcut Command Delete in order to fill with that background color. And then we can zoom back in again, and I'll deselect because of course we had that blur where I painted in that drop shadow. So now I just need to grab my paintbrush, tap the X key so that I'm painting with black, and let's bring it all the way up to 100%. And I'm on the mask for the breaker layer, and we're just going to get rid of all this, right? So I'm going to come along the bottom, over here to the side, click and drag in order to bring that down. And then I can switch to maybe 50% by tapping the 5 key so that at the bottom here, it looks like it's really inside of the glass. Okay, excellent. I'm going to switch the blend mode, but when I do, because I want to switch it to multiply, now all of a sudden I can see through to the edge of the iceberg, which I don't want. So how would I avoid that? I can make a duplicate. I'll use Command J on Mac or Control J on Windows to duplicate it. And then I'll just set the blend mode back to normal. And then I'll hide everything by just filling that mask with black. And then with my paintbrush, as long as it's set to white, maybe 50%, I can start painting in this area. And not only do I hide I'm actually revealing the contents of the layer. So it's hiding that line across there. It's also brightening up these breakers in some points, which I think is going to make it more interesting. All right, we need to add our clouds. So on the layers panel, I'm going to make them both visible the clouds and the storm, and we're going to just drag those down below the bottle. So now the breaker and the bottles are sitting on top of them. And I'll hide the clouds, and we want to work with the storm. So I'm just going to duplicate the bottle mask by just holding down the Option key on Mac, Alt key on Windows, drag it down there. That's great, but it's so dark, right? I like the storm, but super dark. So let's invert it. Well, because it is a smart object, I can go to the image menu and use my adjustments, such as the invert adjustment, and it will add it as a smart filter. And now I get this lovely blue color instead, and it's much brighter. If I want to reposition the mask independently from the bottle, I just unlink them, select the Move tool, and now I can reposition this. So let's scoot it right to there. Then I want the clouds layer to only appear in the area where the storm is. So we can go to the layer menu and create a clipping mask, just like we did with the curves adjustment layer. So now those clouds are only appearing in the bottle, and I of course can reposition them. And I can also add a mask to them because I don't really want them showing up at the bottom of that bottle. And I'll just make sure that I'm painting with 100% with black, and I'll just paint that out at the bottom. So now we're seeing the storm from the bottom layer, and we're seeing the clouds from the top layer. And the nice thing about the clipping mask is this: I need to make a change to the mask itself. I'll click on it in the layers panel, and then I can paint with black to paint that portion out of the mask, because we don't really want to see the clouds up in that top area where there was that bottle stopper. Okay, so moving on quickly, we need to add the face image. So let's go ahead and target that. This is our secondary element. I'll zoom into 100%, and I'll return back to the object selection tool. This time I'm just going to use the lasso because I'm going to get I'm giving it a little bit of help, because otherwise it's going to try to select this area down here. Oh, and it did it anyway, so that's okay. I'll just use the marquee tool, and I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm just going to select out this area because I'm going to create my own reflection, because this reflection won't really work because it's all ripply. All right, so on the layers panel, let's go ahead and add our mask by clicking on the mask icon. We'll zoom back out, and then we'll transform this. First thing I want to do is just right click in there, and I will flip this horizontally. And then let's also make it a little bit smaller because we're putting it back in the background there. And then I'll tap Return or Enter to apply that transformation. Now let's zoom in to 100% and just make sure, see that little halo, that black line around there? I don't want that. So with the mask targeted, we're going to do the same thing we did a moment ago. I'm going to go to Select and then Select and Mask. And I'm just going to use that Shift Edge, pull that over, and now we don't have that halo. Terrific. Now, to make a duplicate of it, I'm going to want to make the duplicate darker. So I can't just use Command J in the Layers panel, because then if I change one, the other instance of that Smart Objects is going to change. So instead, I'll go to Layer, Smart Objects, and then I'm going to create a new Smart Object via Copy. Then I can transform this, and we'll go ahead and flip this vertically. Now it's down here, so let's just drag that up so they match. And now when I double click to edit the contents of this Smart Object, it's going to bring it up in its own window. We can decrease the exposure a bit. When I click OK, only this copy of the Smart Object was changed. Now, if you ever want to mask more than one layer at the same time with the same mask, we can go ahead and select them both and put them in a group using Command G. And this will be our face group. And we'll just add a mask to that group. So we can see there's the two layers inside of it. I tap G to get my gradient tool. It's going from black to white. Black will hide and white will reveal. So I'm just going to click and drag up. And now we get that nice kind of fading reflection. Okay, I am almost out of time. Let's keep moving along. So two things to unify this, because like I mentioned, that sky, the top sky here in the stage, that was just a JPEG file. And so there's a lot more noise in that than some of the newer images that I photographed. So with this texture layer, I'll just go ahead and make it visible and also target it. And then I'm just going to add a blend mode. So in this case, either overlay or soft light. I actually prefer soft light, but I think overlay is going to show up better in the video. So I'll go ahead and use overlay. So now I've got a nice texture throughout the image. So you're not going to notice that there's a lot more noise in the sky than there was, say, in the face or in the bottle. The other thing we can do is we can always unify through color. And one of the easiest ways to do this is by adding a gradient map. not a gradient overlay, right? Not a gradient fill layer, but a gradient map. And before I add it, I'm just going to tap the D key. That'll set my foreground color to black and the background color to white. And that way, when I go into gradient map, what I basically get is all the colors in my image remapped to grayscale from black on the left to white on the right. But I can click in the gradient and then I have the gradient editor. So if I just wanted to add, say, a little bit of blue in my shadows, I can go ahead and click, let's say at location, 20 here. And then I'll click on the color swatch. And now we can add a color, right? Like any hue and any saturation and any brightness. I'll go ahead and add a blue, not too purple, but maybe there. But the key here is that I don't want the brightness at like 69. I want to bring the brightness down to 20 because that'll be the same level of gray as in that gradient. And then I can go ahead and say, you know what, 85 is just way too saturated, so we can back that off a bit. But this way, if I have some shadows that are cooler and some shadows that are warmer, this blue tint is going to kind of make them more unified and look like they all belong in the same location. All right, so let's actually bring the saturation down to about 20. I want it, well, that might not show up on the video. Let's do 30. Okay, we can see that. I'll click OK and OK again. We could also just change the opacity of the gradient map layer if we wanted to. Or in this case, I'm going to tap B to select my paintbrush and tap 0 to make sure I'm painting at 100%. And then I can just paint with black in this mask in the areas where I don't want it to tint those shades. So I might go ahead and, because I mean, that was a really nice kind of teal color in there. And I might just bring back a little bit of the color in the face. Okay, so I know that I'm almost out of time, but that is the composite that I wanted to create. I just want to show you one more thing because I know we didn't really replace a sky. We just kind of combined two skies, but you guys, you got to check out the new sky replacement. So I'm going to go to Lightroom here. So these images all had their skies replaced. So that is a new replaced sky. That's a new replaced sky. So is that one. So much better than the original skies because sometimes you're at a location and the foreground element is amazing and the sky just isn't, right? So all of these have been replaced. So let's go to this last one right here. And I'm just going to use Command E to edit the original. This must be a Photoshop document. Oh, that's okay. It's only one layer. So then let's go to the edit menu here and go to sky replacement. And you've got these different skies that you can choose from. So there's a bunch of preset skies in there, but you can also load your own. So I've just loaded 4 skies here, but we could take a look at some of them and see what they look like. So that doesn't look right because the size of the sky is too weird. Maybe we'd want something maybe a little bit more subtle like that. No, that doesn't work either. This one works actually quite well. There are other ones, like if we wanted to come in here, we could add a rainbow behind the sky. I think that looks quite lovely. If we just go up to blue skies and we add just a plain blue sky, you'd be able to see like what a great mask it's actually making. So let's return to the one that I loaded. And this is just my sky. You can load your sky by just clicking the gear icon and then going and getting a new sky. And you can create groups and put your skies in groups and everything. But one of the coolest things you can do is you can go ahead and you can scale the sky, right? As big or as small as you want, and you can reposition it. And as you do that, Photoshop is actually going to change the lighting adjustment and the sky or the sky adjustments up here and make it blend and add some of that color into the foreground element. So that's a little bit too big because I want the moon in there. So let's go to like 120%. And then I'm also going to flip it, right? Because the way I see it, you can see it knows where the horizon is. So it's matching the horizon in the image with the horizon in the photo that I'm replacing the sky in. And I just want to scoot that over. Actually, let's scoot it over. Oh, let's scoot it over so the moon is right there in the center. All right. And of course I can change any of these options. If I want it to look a little bit, more yellow, I can do that. Or I can make it look more blue. I can add brightness. So I can either brighten up the sky or I can darken it down, maybe make it a little bit more moody. And you can also say, you know what? I want the lighting mode in the foreground. Don't multiply it, but screen it. Keep it lighter. All right. In this case, I think the artificial intelligence here, multiply was a better choice. But you can also change the lighting adjustment. You can change the color adjustment. So that's what's happening to the foreground elements there. And then we can output this to new layers. So when we click OK, completely non-destructive, because I've made the changes to all of those layers, or to all of the adjustments. It actually creates like a brightness, which is an adjustment layer, a sky temperature, which will help me with the yellow to the warm to cool, the yellow to blue, and then the foreground lightings. And of course, I can come in here and I can make changes to the masks and everything as well. So if you do have to replace the sky, that is just a really cool new feature that I hope you'll definitely check out. So with that, you guys, I'm out of time. I'm very sorry, but I hope you learned something. I hope you had a little bit of fun, maybe a little bit of inspiration in there. I'm hoping that you'll check out all those new tools and enjoy the rest of Max. So thanks again for joining me. Take care.